Hi, this is Marco Pimentel. Welcome to the podcast, Someone Like You. In this first season, you'll discover founders, creators, entrepreneurs, and business owners who are passionate about creating business models with lasting, sustainable climate solutions.
For our environment and for our economy and for our carbon footprint as a society, we can't afford to take, make, and dispose of an item. We now have to, take, make, and loop as long as we possibly can by creating value. And at the very, very end of life, we still have to have a solution for the material that it does not end up being a disposable item.
Chopsticks. You probably don't think of them often. They're used by millions of people, and every day, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of these chopsticks are actually thrown out. You go to a sushi restaurant, you use them, you throw them out. Chopsticks are also made from bamboo, quite a sustainable raw material, and a perfect material if you're trying to be a leader in building a circular economy model. And that brings me to this week's episode. I sit down with Felix Böck, founder and CEO at ChopValue, a certified B Corp based in Vancouver, Canada, that creates high-performance circular economy designs made entirely from recycled bamboo chopsticks. Hailing from South Germany, Felix came to Canada to complete a PhD at the University of British Columbia in innovation on composite materials with bamboo as the main natural fiber resource. He knows his stuff about bamboo. Being a carpenter by trade and having a passion for woodwork and product design, Felix founded ChopValue in 2016 in the hope of leading the way in circular economy models becoming the norm. In 2020, ChopValue launched its turnkey microfactory franchise concept with microfactories now operating globally, and with partners like the Vancouver Airport, 50 million chopsticks, yes, 50 million chopsticks, have been recycled and transformed and diverted from the landfill. I love this conversation. It started with one chopstick and a simple idea, and I hope this conversation inspires you like it inspired me. Well, Felix, thanks very much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Marco.
I'm excited for this conversation, and wanted to kind of start with a little bit about your background. You have a PhD at the University of British Columbia at UBC, and I wanted to just ask, you got to learn a lot about bamboo, so I just thought let's start there. The raw material, you understand it quite complex, the complexity of it, but quite intimately. You did some schooling around it, but just wanted to understand just why bamboo and just understanding the sustainability aspect of bamboo and why you got intrigued by it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, to me, bamboo is it's a fascinating material. It's super fast growing. It's like one of the most renewable wooden grasses on Earth, and I think it's not one of these things that you feel like you're gonna specialize in, or you found your niche when you're 6 years old, and someone asks you what you want to become. But throughout my journey, I'm a woodworker by trade, and then I joined university after my trades career. When I started specializing in wood engineering, I kind of found myself really, really fascinated by bamboo as a raw material. So that's how I got into that niche. And through learning about the properties, learning about the performance, there's just like so much to do and so much potential when you look at carbon sequestration and all these like technical topics. But yeah, my expertise was really, how would I use bamboo as a raw material for new, beautiful engineered products? And that's what really attracted me in my journey.
And did you start using bamboo and just purchasing it and using it in any other way from a carpentry or in a career perspective before ChopValue?
Yeah, so I initially started. So what brought me to Vancouver was the offer to do my PhD in structural bamboo products together with UBC and MIT. I dragged this on for forever, this research, because I got distracted with too many projects in the industry, and I very quickly started my own small engineering firm before starting ChopValue. So I started Crosslink Technologies It's an engineering firm that really tries to connect industry with academia. And all I connected was all that amazing bamboo research that's going on and how that translates to activities that are already going on in the industry, mostly in Asia, Southeast Asia. My first job was in East Africa and Ethiopia, to make sure we substitute tropical timber to bamboo species. And that's really what got me into the potential of all of this.
So it sounds also like you're very entrepreneurial. Like when did you make that connection? You went, carpentry to school, doing your PhD to starting an engineering company right away.
Yeah, I think you only know that about yourself in hindsight, because so to me it was always obvious. I couldn't stop at a specific step. I wasn't the technical guy who developed a new material and then just handed it over to someone without following through. I feel like while you develop a material, at least that's what I know now is called entrepreneurial. While you develop a material or a new machine or a new process, my mind started thinking of how that could scale or how that could commercialize or how much that would cost. And I think that's what entrepreneurship is all about. You're trying to connect your engineering expertise with how we would place this on the market the very, very best way.
Yeah. So ChopValue, how did you come up with the concept or the idea for this?
Yeah, so this is probably that evolution of the story, right? It's like bamboo itself is not the best pickup line when you live in Vancouver. So, my friends would laugh about me saying, hey, so why did you move to Canada to study bamboo? We don't really get it. And I tend to, take myself not too serious. And I was always saying, look, just look in front of you. We have so much bamboo in our urban forest. And I always would point at these chopsticks, and I would say, hey, and I actually have some chopsticks here, as always, as I do on my desk, Imagine if I ever run out of research material from all these amazing countries that have bamboo as a resource. I could probably just recycle chopsticks and still be successful. And I was just joking about it. And then one day, at sushi dinner, I thought, let's just add that up. Let's see how much volume of bamboo raw material in the form of chopsticks is actually readily available in front of us. So I kind of, the typical napkin story. At sushi dinner, we were just doing the math of understanding that with our 1,000 restaurants in Vancouver alone, we throw out around 100,000 chopsticks per day. And if you make that math, you're thinking there's no way we can justify that these little guys go into the compost. It doesn't take a PhD to understand that this is bad for the life cycle assessment. If these chopsticks have traveled 9,000 kilometers to get here, and we're feeling good about calling them disposable, and we're feeling good about throwing them out into the bin, that just doesn't make sense. So I thought, why not starting a viable concept, and we called it ChopValue. Don't judge me on the name. We came up without any planning exercise. It just happened overnight. And we just started out. And, after 2 weeks, we had collected the first 60,000 chopsticks from 10 restaurants just in Kitsilano. And then I was like, oh no, it actually works. And that's how it all started.
Wow. Yeah, it's the scale thing is quite interesting. And I was listening to a virtual summit, and one of the large consumer product companies was talking just about doing dishes, and just the simple thing of not washing and rinsing ahead of time and putting it in the dishwasher. It's a simple thing. People know you can just do that. And how much energy is used by washing these dishes ahead of time or just rinsing them. But what was just crazy about it was just the scale. And because they are huge, one of the largest consumer goods company, the scale that they were just talking about in terms of this simple solution takes off 500,000, cars per year. And you're like, that's mind blowing. But similar to what you're, 100,000 chopsticks per day. And I'm assuming that was just in the rough 1,000 restaurants that are in Vancouver area.
It's just in the right proximity around us, right? And
around you.
I feel like the story that stuck with you when you were listening to the summit with with the dishwasher and how relatable that feels
Yeah.
because it's something you're
Yeah.
experiencing every day. I think that's also
Yeah.
the relatable part to our brand because we eat a lot of seafood, but a third of the population is actually eating with chopsticks every single day. So we can tap into this emotional connection to this resource that we can now educate on why this is such a big problem. And I'm
Yeah.
not pretending that we're saving the planet by recycling chopsticks, but I have this strong responsibility that our team is actually leading by example, proving that we can create a viable circular economy business with something small and humble like a chopstick.
Yeah, if you can do it for something that is like a chopstick, you're
Yeah,
you're potentially creating a business model that other people can take and leverage and build out. So
exactly.
when you understanding, in North America, obviously we use a lot of chopsticks. They have to come. Most of them come from Asia. What are they doing in Asia with chopsticks? Do they recycle them? Do they, thinking just the larger market there? What do they do there?
Yeah, unfortunately not. So that was one of my immediate things that I checked is like, has this been done before? Why is no one doing this? Why am I coming up with this? I'm so new to this problem that other cultures probably were drawn to for decades. I would assume, right? But I think there's a certain a challenge that appeared in China, for example, where we're using 33 million chopsticks every lunch break, or Japan, where we're using 1 billion chopsticks in Tokyo alone per year. It's like the numbers are crazy, but the
Yeah,
problem is in the bigger scheme of things, it's not big enough of a problem to actually care about. That's the sad truth. It's so whenever
yeah,
someone will probably get hooked to, oh, I want to do something with these chopsticks, there's probably someone else who tells them, oh, if you have all this knowledge and expertise, can you please tackle a bigger problem with us? And because chopsticks is just a little side project.
yeah,
So yeah, it has not been done before. In Japan, like 15, 16 years ago, they they trucked a bunch of chopsticks from restaurants outside the city, chipped it up, and made paper out of it. But that was just not economical because if you're not creating
yeah.
value from the resource to the value add design end product, it just doesn't work economically.
Economically. So you did this pilot. You collected about 60,000 chopsticks and said, you created the name and started. What did you do to begin with? So you collected these chopsticks. Did you have an idea of what you're going to? Was it just an idea of how do you make this back into a circular raw material, or how did you? What was the first steps?
Yeah. So how I went about is I just tackled it like any other of my engineering projects where I knew it needed to be a material of really uniform, high quality. It had to be designed in a very modular way so that it can be scalable, and it had to be beautiful, to be honest, because it has to, tell a story. And like first steps first was to actually engineer and develop the machinery for it, because there's no off-shelf machinery that can take chopsticks and turn it into engineered material. So this was the first development that we did in house, and then I think one thing that shouldn't be neglected is we didn't just collect 60,000 chopstick once. We like the moment we had these partnerships with these restaurants, we never stopped. So like we now had this responsibility every week to visit these restaurants and pick up the chopsticks because we know we didn't want to disappoint them. We didn't want this to be tackled as a one-off project where we are recycling a few chopsticks and never show up again. Like all of a sudden, they literally called us and counted on us to come back every week. So yeah, this is literally how it is since up to today. We have not stopped collecting, and that's why we are now, I think, at 57 million chopsticks recycled and transformed into new product.
Wow. So a lot of people probably immediately would think, how would you get these from the restaurants? Did you have to change it? I'm assuming you had to change a restaurant's process. How does that work in terms of collecting chopsticks from all these restaurants?
We provide them with bins. It's as simple as that. Their contribution is that they are just separating the sticks into the bins. That makes the sticks really dry and clean and ready for us to pick up. And then we have a very efficient pickup route. So our cost of raw material is pretty much just the labor and the transportation that we put in locally to pick up the sticks from our restaurant partners.
Okay, and when the chopsticks come in, is there a certain process? Is there a sanitizing process? Like how does that work?
Yeah, we weigh the chopsticks first because we want to understand how many chopsticks are recycled by every single restaurant. So we have statistics, that we gather for us and for them that we can share with them on how much they contribute to the environment. When they come into our gate at our microfactory here in Vancouver, they go through a sorting process. Then they go through a water resin. So that's a resin we developed from the automotive industry. And then it goes into a dryer unit, and that dryer dries them until they're really, really, crack solid from a moisture content. And I think the interesting part is it's actually a very clean resource. So chopsticks are so clean when you look at it from an engineering perspective that throughout the production process, when we are adding a lot of heat, steam, and pressure when forming that new engineered material, that's how we're getting rid of all the contamination and bacteria. So there's no necessarily a cleaning step or a chemical solution that we're using, because that would create more wastewater.
Yeah. So it sounds like when you're thinking about this brand and building it up, how do you recycle chopsticks? How do you use this and turn it in? But it sounds like you brought it into like an engineering role first of how do you solve that problem? How did you end up creating the brand and the first, like, what was your first product? Like, how did you try to sell the first product? And just curious around just that aspect of that brand building piece.
Yeah, a lot of naive assumptions, So, the business plan was 3 lines in Excel. One line is that's how many chopsticks we think we can collect per week. Second line was this is how many tiles we can press in our production capacity. Tiles is kind of our unit, that we're making with our machinery. And then the third line is how much do we need to sell each tile to make money? These were my 3 lines. So I knew I can't produce with this first initial idea. I can't produce flooring. You can't, like, from an engineering perspective, yes, but from a material and a price perspective, no. So you're trying to just find now a niche of in what world would this, in what niche product positioning would this concept actually work? And this is when we just looked at the square tile and say, okay, we're not going to sell raw material. We need to actually end up making an end product that can have a brand on the name. That was kind of the hypothesis 1. And hypothesis 2 was, let's cut it into a hexagon. You see this tile in the background here on the wall. And just call it the starter set for circular economy, your wall decor that you can mix and match on your wall and tell a story to your friends. With that assumption, I went into business, and obviously started production and just assumed people would love it and buy it, and that's never the case.
Yeah.
But this is how it started. So it takes a few, takes some risk, takes some commitment, takes some leadership, and then over time we just developed the product portfolio beyond that hexagon tile. And today we have more than 150 SKUs of products in our portfolio. Wow.
And how did you, when you think about just funding this, did you fund it through family, friends? Did you do venture? Was there grants from different grant options? Just curious how you ended up funding the startup.
Yeah, so the first 2 years we bootstrapped. So every tile that came out of the press had to be sold to survive. I must admit, like the first 1.5 years, I was a full-time researcher, had a full-time job, and had my other company. And every single dollar that I made, I paid to my first full-time employees. In ensuring that every single month we grow into a real business, and that worked. And I think it's one of these ideas that it's probably not the wisest decision to go on day one out to the street and say, hey, I want to recycle chopsticks for a living. Do you want to fund our business idea? So I think I was sane enough to know that this might not be working. But I also knew that if we make it work, this might actually be very attractive for venture capital or angel investors to invest in. And this is how we grew through the last phase of the company.
Yeah. There's a certain point when you start to look at those options for funding and where at what point you'll start to have either an easier time of getting funding or a little bit of a harder time. Every week on Someone Like You, we dive into stimulating conversations with founders, entrepreneurs, business owners, and the likes who are consciously and successfully creating sustainable business solutions for the long haul. Tune in every week for a new inspiring conversation on leading climate solutions, and if you're enjoying the podcast, please share it. And also, subscribe to the platform of your choice and give us a rating and a review. It'd be much appreciated. When it comes to the different products, how is pricing comparatively to I have a coaster here, for example, and there's obviously you have 150 SKUs. People talk a lot about sustainability and different brands that play in sustainability and this assumption that there's a carbon tax, and that carbon tax being that it's more expensive to make things better quality, make things that are more sustainability focused, because you're thinking about that. How does ChopValue's pricing and how do you look at that market dynamic?
Yeah, so I think there's a really pragmatic approach to it. I think our pricing has become much more relevant and kind of understandable since the entire world understands better the supply chain interruptions that we're all experiencing, and that now that shipping containers don't cost $3,000 from China to North America, but sometimes $20,000. It affects everyone in the industry, and everyone understands. Okay, I get it now. If you produce locally, you're also hiring local talent. You're paying for local salaries, local material costs, local rent, local lease, and this is how you form your pricing model. And in order for this to work, sustainably and long term, everyone has to understand that it's just normal that we are not paying $2 an hour for labor, but maybe we pay $20, $25 for production staff, and this is how we can support our pricing strategy. And I think, interestingly enough, especially over the last 18 months, we actually see our products competitive with every product that we are currently competing with. It's an interesting development because other products don't really create more sustainable value or a better carbon footprint. They just got up in pricing because of one factor alone, and that's logistics. So this is really the eye-opening experience for us, where we are now really experiencing this rapid growth because all of a sudden everyone gets it. If they are paying the price for our products, they're paying for the local talent, the carbon footprint, and the responsible sourcing. If they're paying the same pricing for their traditional product range, then the reason for that being is higher logistic price that didn't really create value for them.
Yeah, and when you think about your microfactories, what kind of are you producing? Like, what kind of waste do you end up producing, if any, in the way that your product is made?
Yeah, that's a super good question, because you got to be really careful if you develop a new concept and you develop a new product that many see as a green product, that you're actually, doing everything you possibly can not to greenwash yourself, right? And we, I would say from day one, in the first year of the microfactory existence, all we really had to make sure of is that we survive and then are in business. Year 5 now in business, we actually use every single offcut, every single waste piece for a value-add product for our customers. So I give you an example. We have a client in the education space, and we would create tabletops for them. And every single offcut that we're making, we're cutting up into key tags, name tags, or keychains for their students to tell a story to the parents or to the family that this is the material that I'm sitting at and learning at school. And I think this is now combining social responsibility with our motivation of having a zero waste production.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because you bring up that where it's one thing to create the end result of a sustainable product, but then what does your business model do in order to deal with all the everything else that you have, and recycling and being able to use all the little pieces is fantastic. I'd love to just chat about the circular economy. So when you created this idea, where was the circular economy in terms of just, the space, or just the idea? Like now it's starting to become much more of a known idea or business concept, but was that a big challenge initially, just from either just people understanding what it is to funding that idea?
Marco, I think I often have to remind myself that when I started the business, I was not able to explain the term circular economy. I actually did not know what it is. I started the business based on a very simple rationale of being more efficient with our natural resources, and me loving bamboo as a natural resource. I wanted to ensure that every single piece of bamboo that is already in the economy gets looped back into a product. And I think through that explanation, I'm using this explanation as explaining the simplest example of a circular economy. So, what I just mentioned, I want to loop back a resource that was previously defined as a waste stream. And my rationale, or my ideal is there is no such thing as waste. There are only wasted resources that we have not found a commercialized way to repurpose. So circular economy to me has really evolved, where this has become now a much, much more tangible understanding for a variety of industries, where we just understand now we can't afford, for our environment and for our economy and for our carbon footprint as a society, we can't afford to take, make, and dispose of an item. We now have to, take, make, and loop as long as we possibly can by creating value. And at the very, very end of life, we still have to have a solution for the material, that it does not end up being a disposable item.
Yeah, it's a great explanation of what a circular economy should be looked at. You had mentioned in, I think, a previous interview before, that your trade secret is community, and that's the key to circular economy, and that it should never feel like a transaction. Can you explain that?
Yeah, for sure. I just recently learned this through my team. Actually, I just realized that the bigger a corporation gets, the more communication, the more processes are transactional, and I really resonated with that, because I realized that our superpower as a brand is that we are actually a true grassroots movement, that is really community based, but with the scale and the potential to do this on a global scale. And I think that's the motivating and inspiring part, because if we were to choose to scale our business as a mega factory, as a mass factory in one location, then we would need to source materials from all over the world to produce in one place, and then ship product all over the world. And it defeats the entire purpose of what we're doing. But by expanding responsibly with our microfactories in all of these communities, we truly build these relationships with every single restaurant partner, no matter if it's a large chain restaurant that becomes a client at the end of the day, or it's a mom and pop shop that is just really, really excited to recycle the chopsticks with us. And this is what truly gets me up every single morning. We can build a global brand by not neglecting or underutilizing all these small relationships that we're building on a local level, while we're growing into such a large movement.
Yeah, it's one thing that I noticed, and we were, you've mentioned now this microfactory concept, but it's a great point where as you continue to grow, as you continue to scale, you'd have to start picking up chopsticks from all the different locations, increasing your transportation across into one big huge factory. That factory just needed to get bigger, and it's harder. So how did you come up with the idea of franchising and micro factories? It doesn't seem like a very common, a common way to do things. So, just understand, like, why was that a, kind of a breakthrough in in your growth, but also just in the way that you thought about doing business?
Yeah, I got challenged very early on by more traditional thinkers, or people who always give you free advice and then walk away after 2 hours conversation and then leave you with it. And I think that the early challenge I got was like, Felix, how do you grow this 10 times bigger in Vancouver? And I always wanted to find a responsible answer to it, saying, I do not want to grow this 10 times bigger in Vancouver. But at the same time, I obviously want to grow the impact. And at the same time, I want to grow the business. So I thought, what if I could have satellite locations in other cities? So I played the scenario through my head where I was like, what if I replicate the economy of scale that we have in Vancouver to another city just to prove out the concept? What will be the biggest challenge is that I'm not physically there as the one leading the team. That's kind of your first level of growth learnings as a founder. So I was like, how do I create this commitment and responsibility of someone who knows their own city 10 times better than I do, has an emotional connection to their community, and how do I allow them to have skin in the game? And this was the key for us to think, hey, we should probably allow independent ownership of these locations that we call microfactories. And we want to make sure that they do whatever they think success looks like in their community. And they can run this with 3 people, they can run it with 10 people. But all we're doing, like the only ego we have in this development is we know how to manufacture the products, we know how to commercialize them, and we will put this into an operating manual to allow others to succeed. But we are just the enablers. And I think that was the key of us committing to, let's use franchising as a tool for growth.
And the franchise owners, are they producing, they're collecting in their community? Are they producing the raw material and the finished product as well? How does that work?
Yeah, they go from start to finish. So they do, like, their 3 business sectors are, the collection of the raw material, the recycling program, the manufacturing of material and product, and the fulfillment and the local market placement of the product. And this is in all 3 sectors. We obviously provide guidance and training, not only pre-opening, but also ongoing training through our kind of training staff, coaching staff, facilitation. We have a little ChopValue University that is a virtual program where they have access to all sort of, marketing assets, sales enablement tools, our sales pipeline, our customers. And I think this is truly how we're building this community of change makers, and everyone is creating successful businesses.
Yeah. And when you think about growing, is that the growth path right now? Is that impact across launching and expanding with the franchise model?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, so far, this is really exciting, to see that it seems to be relevant enough to have a lot of interest and franchise partners signing up all over the world. We have now, I think, over 35 locations signed and in development in 6 different countries, from Singapore, the UK, to Canada, Mexico, US. So yes, it seems like the right approach. We just now need, as brand, to think about, do we also want to own a few microfactories in some of the key markets that we know exactly what kind of impact we want to create, or how do we collaborate with our big franchise partners? And that's just exciting. That next chapter is now really exciting for us.
And so all of the so most of your products in terms of being in stores or online, so you sell direct to consumer online. How would a franchise owner impact the sales of a product? Would it be trying to get products sold at a local, local stores? How does the, I guess, the top of the funnel sales to then expand all the franchisees works in terms of the demand from the customer?
Yeah, so our motivation is, and these are some of these learnings that I needed to get as franchisor. We're actually not allowed to promise business success to our franchisees, but we have the motivation in our Vancouver team to always create more business than we can produce ourselves, so that we can distribute our success to our franchise partners. So this, probably saying this is already not allowed, but this is at least my internal motivation. But the tools that we're actually providing our franchise partner is that they are able to offer whatever product market fit they think is best for the community, that they can offer that locally in their city. Meaning they might have retail displays in local retail partners. They might contact their local restaurants if they want to renovate with them. They're working with local designers and architects who want to have a unique material for their developments. And this is kind of something that we still figure out and grow on what the best recipe for success really is here.
Yeah. And from a product perspective, obviously chopsticks, you've been growing and scaling, and like you said, you're doing this with chopsticks and you're building this, and I think that message is pretty loud and clear, how you can have such an impact with it. Have you thought about other products? Have you thought about, you have this, this system that you've essentially built to scale and do this in a meaningful way? Have you thought about introducing other products in terms of the raw material?
Yeah, it's definitely no secret, that's something in the works. But I feel like right now we need to ensure that we use the humble chopstick as a, almost like as a symbol to launch a viable circular economy, and then really push to be successful in the most responsible and sustainable way before we would then launch with new partners and new strategic demand relationships, a new resource.
Yeah. What's the, if you think about the next, 3 to 5 years or even beyond, where, what's your ultimate goal with ChopValue in terms of the business or the impact, or, the greater aspect of the business?
Yeah. So I firmly believe that, every city in the world deserves a ChopValue microfactory, or, just generally a microfactory that actually uses local resources that you can urban harvest and turn right there into an end product that is needed by that community. And that can range from home decor to functional building products to whatever waste streams actually give us as opportunities. But I think this is the only way how we can actually create a net zero manufacturing world.
Yeah. Well, I'm as we kind of get to the end of it, I'm a huge fan of the book, The Lorax, the Dr. Seuss books, and I read it to my 2 young boys all the time, and they're like, "Dad, stop reading this book to us." But it's really just a story of overusing our resources, and then just a simple child that has a seed that can make a change and an outcome. A lot of people ask, what can they do? What can people or businesses do to take the first step? What would you tell somebody?
I'm a really big fan of what our team kind of adapted as a philosophy of how crazy it is that we're doing this one chopstick at a time. And I think honestly, this is where we start. And we've built a multinational brand with incredible people, incredible talent that I never ever thought would be part of this movement. So the only thing I can give people on the way, instead of specifics of, do you use your own coffee mug or do you recycle? Like, that's the starting point. But I think the only thing I can actually give on the way as inspiration is, if we can do it with a chopstick, imagine what else is possible. And if we think scale, and if we truly stand behind of and follow through of what we do.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking the time today. I think that what you built is really incredible. The way that you've stopped and thought really methodically around how do you properly build this out in a way that is scalable but also sustainable. But I also think that the big picture here for people listening too is the model that you've created. I'm people I think should listen to this, because if they've thought about other ideas and how they can get involved in a circular economy, I think what you've done with a chopstick to creating a beautiful material. Like I think that's I think that the outcome of a chopstick is a beautiful material, and I get to use it every day, so I see it and feel it. So that's you have quality there, but congratulations to you and your team and everything that you've been building, and I encourage everybody to check out your products, and maybe they're inspired to be a franchise owner somewhere out there. And thanks again to Felix for your time, and I appreciate everything that you've done.
Anytime, Marco. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, thank you. This podcast is co-produced with The Brand is Female. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Someone Like You. And if you did, please share this. We're a new podcast, and I would love it if you could share it with a family member, friend, colleague, work colleague. Share it on Slack, whoever you do. Just share and spread the message of these incredible brands. Please also support these type of companies. They're doing the hard thing, and the hard thing often takes a lot of people to get on board. And don't forget, please subscribe on the platform of your choice and give us a rating and review. I'm Marco Pimentel. Thank you for joining us today. For more information on Someone Like You, you can find us on Instagram at Someone Like You Podcast, with all the links to the podcast, our website, and more information about the brands that we feature. Thank you again.